There'd be days I would contemplate suicide in the bathtub, like, oh, what if I just drown myself here? Or, sometimes just cutting yourself just to try to let some type of pain out. So I would go through some of those things. I eventually got tattoos and piercings, I think mainly just because of the pain, where you're trying to find some expression to your pain. I was living that. I was drinking all the time. I would bring alcohol to school. I remember going to high school just with gin in my Sprite bottle, sometimes vodka. And it was also just, made you feel like somebody. Like, I've already experienced all this other stuff. What am I doing here in school? I managed to pass. I managed to make good grades, but like deep down inside, I was dying. I was dead. I didn't really grow up in a religious home. We didn't have much talks about like the Lord or anything like that. I grew up in South Carolina, so it's part of the Bible Belt. There's churches on every corner. If you ask somebody, pretty much everybody's aware of Jesus, even if it's not necessarily a relationship. And so my family was definitely just probably more morals based, where it was like right and wrong, good and bad, but not necessarily because God said so. So I remember like I would go to vacation Bible schools. I love going to vacation Bible schools. I think my mom, one year I asked her to take me to like 8 different ones. So I was like at all these different churches, Catholic, Protestant, Baptist, everywhere. But I didn't have a relationship with the Lord, and he wasn't present in our home. I had, for the most part, a normal upbringing, but yet something in me was still very empty. So around like 10 or 11, I could definitely remember starting to feel like the emptiness and just kind of like the purposelessness, Also bored. My parents were working a lot, and, just some relational voids in my life, probably some emotional emptiness for me. So I had a friend in the neighborhood, and we started getting into drinking. We would sneak the alcohol from our parents' kitchens and get it into cigarettes. We'd be stealing cigarettes and smoking. And I know around like 12, I ended up being in my first relationship, and he was an older teenager boy. And that's who I lost my virginity to consensually. And so I became sexually active at 12. And from there, I just really, like, the doors to just partying and promiscuity just opened after that. You got one little taste, and now, like, that's where you felt, like, affirmation and love coming from, attention from boys. I used to live for that. That was just the basis of where I felt worthy or where I felt loved. And something that really impacted me and really probably pushed me even further into the darkness and the life of promiscuity and partying was my 7th grade. It was getting close to summer because it was a holiday weekend that a lot of people would always visit our city in. I was doing my usual. I was out with one of my friends. We would always just find parties to go to. We'd find clubs to sneak into. We were out what's called the Boulevard, where I'm from, and it was just known to be a place where people just flaunt their looks, flaunt their cars, hook up if you can. And we were out at like 2:00 in the morning one time. We could have caught a taxi home, but we were just hoping to find one more party to get to. And some guys approached us, invited us back to their hotel room, opened up a beer. We were just drinking, and we already knew the routine. If hookups were gonna happen, we were just gonna do it. And so my friend and I both, engaged in sexual activity at the time, separate rooms. But for me, mine ended up turning into a gang rape. So mine started with a consensual person, man. And then all of a sudden, guys just started coming through the balcony door. And one by one, they just, started having sex with me. And somebody was recording it on the side. And, all I could remember laying there was just, do I scream? If I scream, will they kill me? Do I just lay here and let them finish? And so I just remember putting my head to the side, looking at my friend, utterly confused what's happening. A lot of anger, a lot of fear happening, and, just enduring it till it finished. And, I remember they were done. I got dressed. I remember looking at a lamp by their hotel door, and I said, I just really want to smash it, but I don't want to make them get charges on their bill. And so I held my anger in, and I just remember going to the beach, just very lost, very shocked. And eventually one of the guys from that party drove me and my friend back to her house. We were snuck out. Our parents didn't know where we were. And, that definitely initiated a season that lasted for a lot of years of depression, of being lost. I didn't have anybody to tell because we weren't even supposed to be out. They were on vacation, I think from Michigan. So what would it even be worth to tell anybody? Because how could we find them? So it was really just a secret I carried. I told my ex-boyfriend and he was just like, what do you want me to do about it? Obviously, my friend was there, and then I told another friend when I went back to school because I was still in 7th grade. So I remember being on the recess playground and just telling her, like, hey, this happened last weekend. And she was like, what? But other than that, I lived with it. It was just something I buried. I couldn't talk about it. I realize now, like, that really brought me into this place of just feeling very, like, worthless. I got into being promiscuous, especially after that, as a cop-out from ever feeling like something ever being taken from me again. So I ended up engaging in, like, just very casual relationships, hookup culture, meeting guys off the internet. When the summer was happening, it was just about parties. It was about guys. It was about the conquest. It was about conquering. And that was from 12 to 18. That was my lifestyle. Like, I would go out on the weekends, sometimes sneak out during the week, and I lived for partying. I lived for being sexually attractive. Like, that was my basis of living, my basis of success, But I just remember, walking through, like, I would go to high school and I'd be so depressed. There'd be days I would contemplate suicide in the bathtub, like, oh, what if I just drown myself here? Or sometimes just cutting yourself just to try to let some type of pain out. So I would go through some of those things. I eventually got tattoos and piercings, I think mainly just because of the pain, where you're trying to find some expression to your pain. I was living that. I was drinking all the time. I would bring alcohol to school. I remember going to high school just with gin in my Sprite bottle, sometimes vodka. And it was also just, made you feel like somebody. Like, I've already experienced all this other stuff. What am I doing here in school? I managed to pass. I managed to make good grades, but, like, deep down inside, I was dying. I was dead. And I would drink to feel life. I would drink to try to feel something, even though it made you numb. It numbed your emotions, but it still yet made you feel some type of, like, alive. There was nights I drove home and I don't know how I got home. Like, I'd wake up in my bed and not remember the night before. I woke up naked in bathtubs. I woke up with black eyes from falling, just having to make excuses for my mom. That's just really how I lived from 12 to about 17. And so that was the lifestyle I was living. I only had a couple encounters with God. I wasn't really even seeking him. I didn't feel angry at God. I didn't feel like it was his fault. I think I always knew I had a part in what I was doing. I think I always knew, I was responsible for my actions in some way, but I was owning what I was doing. And so...
And quick question,
yeah.
What did your parents think about this? Did they know that any of this was going on? You mentioned that they didn't know early on as you were sneaking out and doing all these things, but as you grew up, did they have any say in what was happening? Did they know at all?
No, I was very good at lying and making things up. They gave me some freedom. I had a car, but they had no idea. And it was more so because I just crafted stories and, I was able to really hide stuff under details. I would work sometimes, but I just got really good at lying, and they may have had their suspicions, and I got caught doing things here and there and I got grounded. But for the most part, I just was good at lying or just sneaking out. So they really had no idea what I was doing.
So talk to us about that, even the encounter, right? How did the Lord begin to essentially draw you back?
All this time, I never got mad at God, and I didn't blame him. I just carried hurt, and I didn't know I could take it to him. And I remember I went to, like, a youth group one time when I was maybe like 13. And I think I was looking for hope, or I was looking for him, but all it was like a pizza party and games. And I remember leaving really disappointed and kind of angry, where I was like, I thought there'd be more. And so I think that started like just an interest, but I still didn't really like pursue him. I didn't know how. There were no avenues or invitations out there for me to find him at the time. I went to a friend's church. We just decided to go one day. And we partied the night before, went in late, hungover. And they sat us at the front, and that was my first time I experienced prophecy, because the guy he pointed me out and came up and, identified my car at the time. He was like, hey, you drive this white Honda? And I was like, yeah. And then he proceeded to give me a prophecy just about like how I would live, that I'd live very blessed. And I just was like, oh, okay, I remember we all like kind of talked about it on the way home. Like, what does that even mean? I had no context for what blessings meant, for who God really was, what he was about. My mom started going to church when I was like 14 or 15. She gave her life back to the Lord. I went to church with her one time, and the pastor started talking about Revelation, and it really made me uncomfortable. So I left, and I went to go sleep in the car because I think the fear of the Lord was coming, and I didn't like it, the conviction, and I didn't like it. So I left. So those were like the 3 instances I ever went to church in that time. But then I ended up I had a boyfriend. I didn't really have boyfriends up until that whole time, from 12 to 17. Nobody was ever serious. But I ended up getting a boyfriend at like 17. And he eventually, after a few months of dating, he went to jail for some drug charges and found the Lord in jail. And he would send me tracts and minister to me through his letters. And honestly, I just kind of listened and followed along just because I didn't want to lose him, because he was my security. And I was like, oh, okay, you're talking about Jesus and God. Like, sure, I can find a Bible and like talk about him back to you. So I'd be like going and finding scriptures to write him back. But it really didn't mean anything to me. But I could tell there was like a curiosity starting to like happen inside of me. I was becoming more open to him. I think hope was starting to like come alive in me, that like, oh, maybe there is meaning to life. Because I think that was the biggest part for me, was purposelessness. Like nothing ever felt like it had purpose, and I hated that. So he would send letters and talk about the Lord and what the Lord was doing in his life. And I remember one night he had sent me a tract with a little green frog on it. And I just remember sitting in my room and just praying the prayer, like, God, if you're real, like, I want to follow you. I always struggled, like, God, when did I actually, like, believe in you? And he eventually showed me, like, it was that night with that tract that this relationship with him started. You know, like, I can't say anything changed in that instant, but I can tell, like, my senior year of high school just started really changing. And it's just good, you know, it's good tears. But I started to like come alive again. I started to find purpose. I started to see life through love, and the days looked brighter, you know, like it was just, the depression was starting to fade because I found purpose, because God brought meaning to my life. You know, where you're not just existing, but like there's a creator, there's truth, there's a good way, there's a bad way. And so I didn't realize that at the time, but you know, I started getting convicted about things. So the drinking, I started to get uncomfortable with it. I started to get uncomfortable with certain situations and certain attitudes. Like I was very cynical and sarcastic, and God just started like breathing love into me, where I would used to like hide in jokes, and he brought this sincerity out of me where I really wanted to like live right and love people well, instead of always be cynical towards stuff and sarcastic. You know, my boyfriend was in jail for the majority of my senior year. I remember he got out towards the end, and that's where I finally was like, hey, Mom, I have a boyfriend. She was recently going back to church, so that was like my common ground to kind of ease the fact that he just got out of jail. And I was like, but hey, Mom, like, you know, I wanted to tell the truth. That was another part. Like, I all of a sudden just desired to live honestly. Like, I didn't want to lie anymore. I didn't want to hide stuff. I didn't want to do wrong. I wanted to do right. So my senior year of high school was totally different than any other year. I stepped out on so many more things. And so I told my mom that I had a boyfriend, and I said, hey, he's a Christian. And she's like, okay, if he's a Christian, he also had kids. That was the other thing. He has kids. He just got out of jail, but he's a Christian. So my mom was like, okay, well, if he's a Christian, he won't have a problem coming to church. I'll meet him when y'all come to church. And so it was still like a couple weeks afterwards. And, you know, finally, we decided to finally go to church one day with her. And from there, God just really started to change my life, because I felt the presence of God at that church. And they would be singing songs, and it wasn't even anybody leading. It was literally tracks, and they had like slide sheets to put lyrics up on a projector, and you know, so it wasn't like there wasn't anything attractive about the church necessarily. It wasn't because they had the best worship team. It wasn't because of this or that, but like the presence of God was there. The songs would be playing, and I would just be wanting to cry, and I didn't know why, but it was also cleansing, and it was healing. Like he was like dealing with stuff that I didn't even know he was dealing with. So, with every worship service, I'd just be crying, and it would be really just washing away the old life. I remember even the first day I raised my hands in church, where it was just like, I could feel like I wanted to, but I also didn't want to. But it was like, even just raising my hands for the first time in church in praise really like broke something. It broke me open to him even more. My official, I said yes to Jesus happened in a bedroom, and nothing changed really. But everything started to change from there. And going to that church really helped me in my walk. The pastors would prophesy over me, would speak to my destiny, would speak to who I am. And God would just be doing things on the inside. And in my bedroom, I'd go and pray. And from there, it was really his presence that started to change a lot of things for me. And that led me to hunger for his word and for his ways. I just really craved to know him and to walk in his way, the way he wanted me to walk. I know that now is conviction, but I didn't realize that. It was just pure desire, and just, I found love after all these years of looking for love and thinking I had attention, but I never had love. I engaged in sex, but I never had intimacy. And so God was just bringing all these things to me. I just fell in love with him. He's the most beautiful thing that I've ever seen, the most beautiful person I've ever experienced, and so I just really fell in love pursuing him. And not everything changed in an instance, which is so good, because I just see how he was just willing to walk with me and progress. And he would really convict me and get me on certain things at times, but for the most part, he just was willing to walk with me. And I walked with him, and I sincerely pursued him. And in time, you get through some of those humps and those old habits. It wasn't until I was 19 that he really convicted me about having sex outside of marriage. And, it was just this growing uncomfortableness. And I eventually had to talk with my boyfriend, and we decided we wouldn't, because, that's what the Lord wanted of us. That was just another step in following and pursuing him. But it's every time I obeyed him in that way, it just opened me up to more of him. That was really my journey, my process of getting to know him. And then it just created this life of knowing him.
Did you continue that relationship with that boyfriend that had just gotten out of jail?
So we stayed together from senior year until I was about 19 or 20. So sometime maybe 6 months after that conversation, some things just started falling apart. And God was just it was good. My life fell apart in one way, but it came together in another way. I was just really hungry for the things of God, and I knew I had a call of ministry on my life. And I was just really pursuing that. I was really laser focused on pleasing him and obeying him, whatever he wanted. So no, we're not together. It's not my husband now. That relationship fell apart. Let me back up. So I had started seeing this advertisement for a Bible college, and I just really felt a draw to go. And so I had asked the Lord about it for a year. So I started praying about it 2009. And in 2010, I got confirmation to go. But around the same time I got confirmation to go, that relationship fell apart. The youth group I was leading fell apart. And God had been telling me to quit my job for a couple months. And so it was all at once, everything that I had known was gone. But it opened up a door to go to this Bible college. And so that relationship ended in the same season that God was beginning a lot of new things for me.
Janelle, talk to us about that walk, right, with Jesus after. Obviously, you mentioned you were dealing with emptiness from little age, which led you to having sexual brokenness, indulging in alcohol and all these things. And he began to break these things off of you slowly. But talk to us a little bit more about how your walk with Jesus developed, even going to Bible college and just even getting married and all of these things. How did Jesus transform your life?
The way that I experienced transformation has always been just in his word. And it's so good because I didn't mean to cry, but I've noticed in my life, transformation has come through when I get into his word, and then he reveals things to me. And it's really just been a life of obeying his voice. That if he says go this way or do something this way, that I try my hardest to do it the way he has said to do it and when he has said to do it. That's probably been the best way I can explain how transformation happened, is just to like really listen to him. I really took to heart the words in the Bible where it says that you'll hear a voice behind you saying, this is the way to go, walk in it. And so I've just always looked for his voice saying, this is the way to go, no matter how much it hurts, because I've always taken the cross as my example of like, Jesus took all that on him. So who am I not to give this up, even if it hurts? And so that's been that's been how I've experienced this transformation.
What was the process like with God healing the sexual brokenness? You mentioned you were sexually abused at 12 years old, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And you began to have consensual sex even at that age. So with all that brokenness within you, how did he bring you to forgiveness and to just restoration in that area?
The Lord knows when to deal with what in our lives. And so I can look back and see where he dealt with a layer at a time. Obviously, I do believe it began with forgiveness, although I never had like a vengeance towards them. Because like I said, I've just always had an understanding, though what they did wasn't right, I shouldn't have been out either. I was out at 2:00 in the morning as a 12-year-old. I don't excuse what they did, but I also had a part in it. But I do remember there was a day where I specifically asked God to forgive them. And I said, Lord, I look forward to seeing them in heaven, where God, I want to see them in heaven. Like when you realize you've been forgiven of so much, I just sincerely found that place where I forgave them. And though our sins may look different at times, we all need forgiveness. And so I do remember there was a specific day I forgave the people who did it to me. After that, I didn't even really realize how broken I really was until years later, actually probably when I got married. But I can look back and see where God strategically placed people in my life to help heal the wounds that came from men, that God gave me safe men to look at, that he, restored that image in my life, that I didn't look at men as predators. Because even if I was still having consensual sex, there was still a level of fear involved that, hey, you're never going to take this from me. I'm just going to give it up. That's where I became more promiscuous, is because it was really fear-based, that I didn't ever want to experience having that power taken away from me again. So I just chose to be in control and say, hey, you can have it, versus ever take it away. And so God really placed safe men to heal my heart when it came to men. My first pastor became a father figure to me, and, just showed me the gentleness, and that all men aren't evil, and all men aren't sexual and all, or predatorily sexual. My first pastor just showed me the nature of a father. In Bible college, he sent me just a lay pastor at the school we were at. We had no heavy relationship, as far as talking, we didn't have a friendship at all. But at times God would use him to just cover me, be like, hey, Janelle, why don't you look at the Lord this way? I feel like you're really trying to be performance-based right now. He would just come and just watch over me at times, but then he'd leave. He'd just be on assignments, I could tell, from the Lord, just to share words. I had some good friends at one point, and I can see where her husband really became a brother to me and started healing just how I viewed men at the time. So I can look back and see the Lord strategically sent men to my life to help heal me from being broken and used by men. And then on my side, I had to let him in those areas. I had to do away with certain habits. There was one point he had me go through my closet when I lived by wanting to be very attractive and, all these things. I had to throw out wigs. I had to throw out certain clothes. I got rid of things from my old life. There was a season where God really cleaned my closet out. And then I just learned even just how to carry myself. He showed me there's more to life than sex. Because for 8 years of my life, I lived by that being a very big motivator in my life. And that was how I viewed life. It was through that lens. Am I sexually attractive? Is that person sexually attractive? Am I putting off this vibe? Am I, this and that? So it really was just walking with him. And every now and then God would really intensely highlight when to let go of certain things, or when I was still dealing with a mindset or an attitude from that old season, or a pain or a fear. It's just through moments of worship and prayer that we would just talk through things, journal through things, write through things, worship through things. I will say one instance that was really cool on God's behalf. I had finally opened up to my mom when I was, 20, or 21. I can't really remember the age, but years later, I was already an adult before I told my mom about what happened. We were processing, and one day in the car, I was just telling her, I was just like, I wish I could just get an I'm sorry. Like, I don't need much, but like, hey, just tell me you're sorry that it happened. And I knew I wasn't ever going to get it, but I still felt like that at the time. And then later on that night, we had a guest speaker at our church. She was speaking, and she had come out of a similar life style. And while she was speaking, she said, I really feel like the Lord wants me to bring my husband up here and stand in the gap and offer apologies on behalf of any men who's ever wronged you. And I was like, oh my God, you're answering my prayer, God. And so it wasn't the guys that hurt me, but I understood it was the Lord, so I took that as my answer to my prayer. Sometimes, like, I'm not going to preach. Sometimes we don't get the answer in the way we thought we would. But if we can recognize that was the Lord listening and responding, I take that as good enough. And so I went up to that altar that night, and I got that man's hug, and I got his apology. He said, I'm sorry. And I took that as what I needed to continue to heal and to continue to move forward. But it's just been moments like that where I just see like the Lord wants to deal with something. And sometimes it comes up, and I can, anyway, I'll stop because that's probably more just talking. But
you mentioned you were married. So how did the Lord use marriage, your husband, to lead you closer to him, to continue to lead you in that healing process? How did he use that?
My husband was definitely another one that the Lord has used. I thought I was nice and healed and put together until I got married. God had worked through my heart up until being married. I had found this freedom in life and, looking at life correctly and engaging with relationships the right way, the right perspective. And I felt like I was really good going into marriage. And then I got on the other side of marriage, and all of a sudden insecurities and intimacy issues started coming up because I was reminded of how I used to live, because I had been celibate except for one instance. From 20 to 25, I was celibate except for like maybe 1 month. I thought I was good, but all of a sudden all these intimacy issues started flashing back because I started remembering how I used to be used, and I didn't want to be used anymore. And I had associated sex with being used at the time. And so I had to really go through that process with him, with my husband, and with the Lord to renew my mind according to like God's purpose of sex, because it had been so abused in my life. And my perspective on it had been abused, but I didn't know what I needed until I got to the other side. So honestly, the Lord used my husband to just help me heal even further. It looks on the outside like, oh, all these issues and insecurities came up when you got married, but it was actually like the Lord's way of saying, hey, it's a safe place that you can heal from this. But it was never exposed because I wasn't in like a relationship for it to be exposed in. My husband has definitely been used just to show the Lord's patience and gentleness with me again. I've just seen the example of Christ in my husband to be patient with me and to walk with me through things, even when it hurts him, even when the attack's not necessarily against him. Like if I was going through like an emotional low, it wasn't necessarily against him, but it affected him. And so he's really took his position of loving me like Christ loves the church very seriously. And that love creates a space of like security and a place to heal without expectations of performance or anything. Like he's just allowed me to walk with him, and he's been there through a lot of lows, but he's also been there for a lot of highs. And he just made it safe. He made it easy to open up. My husband just was who the Lord knew I needed to continue this emotional journey, because even before we got married, I opened up and told him like, hey, this is what happened to me in life. And, so he already knew going in the life I came out of. He was just able to meet me emotionally. So it's been a walk again. It hasn't been hard moments. It's been conversations on the couch, in the car. They just happen as they need to. And even just recently, like I went through another level of healing, and it surprised me because I'm about 20 years past this incident, and like I didn't realize I still had stuff. And, just recently, the why started popping up. Well, why me? Why did it have to happen to me? And it affects my relationship with God even sometimes. And so, but having a partner to be able to talk about that stuff without being judged or accused, condemned in any way, he's just always been there. It's like I'll open a conversation and then he'll open it more. Like he wants to spread it out, that we can talk about it and get through it just for the whole of the family.
Janelle, who is Jesus to you?
He's Lord, but Lord isn't a scary term. It's a good term. He's the good shepherd. He's our creator. He's our maker. He is the one who knows us, knows me so intimately, yet still loves me. He is holy, but he's so good. Like that's the ultimate word I can use to describe him, because even in his chastisement, his love through it. His goodness through it. He's safe. He's our counselor. He leads us and he guides us. And he's our reward. Ultimately he's the one to be with him is to be with love and to be with life and meaning and purpose. So, yeah.
Janelle, for anybody who's watching your testimony right now, who has gone through some of the brokenness, sexual brokenness that you have gone through in your personal life, and maybe they are watching and they haven't told anybody, and they have not walked in that freedom. Maybe they were gang raped. Maybe they did have sexual relationships at 12 years old, and they haven't processed, and they're watching you right now and they're seeing what Jesus has done in your life. What is an advice or a word of encouragement that you can give to that person, whether it's a woman or even a man watching right now? What can you tell them?
I would say identify safe places to begin to talk about it. Shame hides in the darkness. And when we put things in the light, shame can't rule over us anymore. So if we can confess it to our circle, to, again, safe people, not everybody's a safe person. Not everybody can hold that pain, can hold that trauma. But if you can identify one or two people to share your story with and put it on the light so you're not carrying it in darkness. Also, a level of putting it in the light and putting it before the Lord so it's in his hands. So whenever you're attacked with accusing thoughts or shame, if you've given it to the Lord, then he's your defense. He's the one you hide under and hide beneath and hide, with, that you can't be accused and you can't be judged by something that he already knows about and you've confessed and put before him. So I'm an advocate for living in the light, putting things in the light wherever you can, whenever you can. Bring things out of the darkness, because that's where shame and fear and regret and all that can hide. But when you put in the light, you and the Lord can begin to process it. You can worship through it, and it doesn't have to be your mark and your definition. It can just be something that happened to you, but not who you are.
Janelle, any last words for people watching your testimony right now?
If today has struck something in you, you can take it to the Lord, and don't be afraid of him. Some people might see him as harsh, but he's actually very loving and kind and patient. And he knows a word before it even comes on your mouth. He knows what you need to say. And sometimes you don't have the words. Sometimes it's just tears. And you can go before him and cry, but call on him. Call on his name. And let him come and lead you. It may not come in an instant. It may be a process. Some things in my life have happened instant, and some things have definitely been a process. But if you call on his name and trust that he leads you, you'll begin to see him direct your steps and bring you to people, bring you to other stories, bring you to books. He will lead you and bring you to himself. But it just starts with calling on him. And it doesn't have to be anything to hide from. He knows it all anyway. And so just bring it before him, and you'll find his goodness and his beauty and gentleness and love in it.